empathetically can understand how many arrive at deception and then they treat it as truth. Because in earnest, all of us want to be loved. All of us want to be accepted. All of us want to feel like we're down with the things that make our culture feel relevant and comfortable. But at the same time, we have to be light. And it's difficult to be light when we have accepted fallacy as truth. It's impossible to do it. Shalom, everyone. So this video is about how deception arises, if it's allowed to, in the hearts of those who say they believe. And just because you buy into deception doesn't mean you don't believe. It means that just like a weed can grow around something fruitful like a tree, if it's not taken care of at the root, it can grow into this massive plant. It steals the nutrients from the plant that really wants to grow, which is a tree, right? I don't think that because a tree has a weed growing around it doesn't mean that that tree in and of itself is bad. It just means that something was allowed to grow in its soil. New Age philosophy, in my opinion, presents itself as something calm and acceptable. It's something that seems universally like a truth, or a truism, if you will. An example of this would be astrology. Astrology is highly accepted. And the reason why it is because we look for reasons why we are the way that we are. The problem is that these ideals that are widely accepted are rarely researched thoroughly. So we have like a Disney abridged version of the whole story. So with the example of astrology, and I go into this in detail in my book, How to Be a Believer in a New Age World, there is such thing as a Lilith. So in astrology, you have your north and south node, right? You're supposedly going from the south node into the north node. The north node is the actualization of the soul. Once they've hit maturity, around 30 years of age, they're flipped for their south to north node. And the ideal of this thought is that you come into the world a certain way, but after about 30 years, you flip and you become the opposite in many characteristics. The issue is that when you do this flip, you hit this adversary, this demon called a Lilith. In fact, scripture talks about the Lilith. So the Lilith is a night demon. And the Lilith is attributed to the rowdy desires of an individual. So when we talk about, the zodiac, or we talk about astrology, it's really this seemingly harmless thing, not realizing that the deeper nuances of associating with it are rooted in demonic activity that's been assigned to one's characteristic. So anyway, initiates are found usually when they're going through a very weak time. I found that for me, I didn't really realize that this whole thing called New Age philosophy even existed. What happened was I saw my father transition. I saw my family go through the grieving process of having lost somebody very, very influential in our family. I saw myself go through depression and to really battle it. And when I was in that weak state, I looked around and the people that I thought were closest were farthest from a physical standpoint, but also further out in terms of closeness. So it was just one day, it just seemed like everybody around me was either a Mason. I met this woman who introduced herself to me. She said that she led a coven. I just looked around at the people at work, everybody just subscribed to this philosophy, if you will. And what happens is that they slowly push this way of thought onto the believer. And if you're not careful, the believer will accept these ideals as truth when really they're rooted in the seed of darkness. And you can tell that they're rooted in the seed of darkness because you can analyze whether or not they are in direct conflict with what the scripture says. So there's this ideal that every body or every human body has an electromagnetic field. And this electromagnetic field is what helps manifestation happen. They call it the Teresian field. And it looks like a donut. It looks like if you cut an apple in half, it looks like the lining or the coloring or the shading, inner part of the apple. They argue that the reason why Adam and Eve fell was because they took a bite into the Teresian field. And this Teresian field is what sprang the ideal of philosophy or the perspective of right and wrong, and this ideal that you make your own destiny. But the issue with this thought is that truth, Yahuah's truth, is not subjective. It is not based off of humans or man's perspective. In fact, it is a higher way, and that higher order supersedes all fragmented selves. It is the most purest light, is Yahuah's truth. And anything aside from that, it leads to deception. So when a believer is in a dark place, and if there's no grounding there and you haven't surrounded yourself with a community, if you're just a rogue, the issue is that these people, and people are like, oh, what's wrong with Freemasons? What's wrong with those who are in covens? It's not so much that there's something wrong with those people over there. The issue becomes that the principality that rules an order that seeks to justify worship of other deities, that principality is an error. And anybody who bows and bends the knee to those said authorities is subject to slowly eroding their faith. You'll see this in Greek society. You'll see this in Masonry. You'll see this in covens. You'll see this in groups that idealize a supreme being or or even a Luciferian god, and there's no accountability for the direction that a believer or a person takes as a result. It's just this biting of this ideal, and then the soul is fed by the lies, and before they know it, they can watch their life erode. And I just thought I would make this video because when you are in a vulnerable state, it is so very important to take inventory of those who have been allowed into your domain. Look around you. Take inventory, like, what are these people affiliated with? What do they believe? And it's very subtle, but you'll see it there. That's why I believe that there's such an attack on believers for what they believe while they're in a place of despair, while they're going through things. And it's this love of knowledge. It's this philosophia. It's the 𝐤𐤄𐅄. You know, we look at the scriptures, and it was like all through 1st and 2nd Kings, you notice how there's a heavy mentioning of tearing down 𝐤𝐤𝅄 poles in scripture, like whether or not the king was doing good according to Yahuah's perspective. It was always dependent upon whether or not he tore down the Elohim of his forefathers. And then the Asherah, it's literally that pole a lot of times was this idea that Elohim, that Yahuah, had a wife, and that this wife was philosophy, or it was truth, or it was like 𝐤𐄄𐄅, it was wisdom, and that building these poles to her was okay. And Yahuah hated it because it's not true. Those of Yisrael oftentimes would merge the ideals of their surrounding empires and make it part of their praise to Yahuah. Some might have interpreted it as wisdom. Some might have interpreted it as doing the right thing, but it's the wrong thing. And those who engaged in it, they were punished. They were removed from their positions, because you cannot think for a second that having access to his truth and then moving forward, but willingly accepting the fallacy of the contemporary time, there's no way that Yah is going to reward it. There will be a humble time, an opportunity to be presented with the truth. But some people love their deception more than they love truth. And so what they'll do is, instead of hearing the chastisement or the rebuke, they'll accept and carry on with what they have been doing. How many times has a believer heard that celebrating Christmas is an error? How many times has a believer heard that celebrating Easter is an error? Valentine's Day, that they've had opportunities to witness that there are gods that are associated with these days that are now Yahuah, but they still celebrate them because it's popular to do. I'm sharing this because I empathetically can understand how many arrive at deception and then they treat it as truth, because in earnest, all of us want to be loved. All of us want to be accepted. All of us want to feel like we're down with the things that make our culture feel relevant and comfortable. But at the same time, we have to be light. And it's difficult to be light when we have accepted fallacy as truth. It's impossible to do it. I think it's unfortunate because I read about Leviathan, and I believe that Leviathan is pride. It is this huge thing that has a very difficult time of being subdued. And pride, I believe, is one of the spirits that are the most difficult to subdue. And the reason why is because it masquerades in logic. It hides there like a virus, and it's only when it's agitated that we get to see that it's really there still. And humility, the mop, is what humbles us to reconsider what we have accepted as truth. See, because we may have learned fallacy from those we claim to love. We may have learned fallacy from those who have high esteem in public opinion, but it takes great courage to look at the real original story. Have you ever read The Little Mermaid, the real Little Mermaid? Have you ever really read The True Snow White? Have you ever really read these stories? It's never the Disney version. So it's like at some point we need to grow up and realize that the original form of a lot of the truisms that we've accepted as a culture are not true at all. And they have dark origins, and they prevent us from accepting the full power that we're supposed to have when the poles have been taken down. And it's like when you really truly love Yahuah, you don't want to do anything that's going to defile your relationship. You don't want to do anything that's going to grieve his spirit. You just don't. You just want to get it right. There's nothing culturally worth that. And to become aware, cognizant of how today's time has affected that is one of the greatest steps a believer can take towards purity in his sight. The renewing of the mind, it is understanding what needs to be renewed, is understanding what needs to be released. So maybe some of you have experienced what I'm talking about. You look left, you look right, and all of a sudden you realize there's a commonality between those who surround you. And you realize that they slowly say, oh, the reason why it is written is because of this other thought. And then you slowly begin to accept these other thoughts, and before you know it, it's like, oh, well, I used to believe that. I used to believe that. I used to believe in the scriptures. I used to believe that. But now I don't. Now I have accepted this other doctrine. And that's how it happens. It happens so subtly. And I want to encourage, no, go back. Go back. Don't keep the poison. Don't keep the poison. It looks shiny. It looks like it's nourishing. But just give it some time and you'll see that it is spiritually killing. It is damning. And it is not worth the initial swallow. It's just not worth it. So I hope this helps somebody. Anyways, shalom.